Alright, look, I'm on like 3 hours of sleep and enough caffeine to jumpstart a Brachiosaurus. I did a ton of research for those crocodile videos that I put out a couple months back, and so much of what I learned is ridiculous. One of the biggest ones for me is their origins and longevity. Don't get me wrong, I know that sharks are older, and we always talk about how old sharks are, but I think we need to put into perspective how old crocodiles are too. Sure, modern crocs or true crocs are only around 70 million years old, but their family goes back at least 245 million years. If you're not aware, they're part of a group known as Pseudosuchia that goes all the way back to the Triassic. But wait! Look me in my eye. Did they really originate 245 million years ago, or are they even older than that? You see, while I was researching these lads, I've noticed that during the Triassic, many of these lads were already well established. Like, we're talking a multitude of advanced forms and a plethora of different groups. By the time they appear in the fossil record, there are already multiple clades and families of different kinds of animals. The oldest ones are all the way from the start of the Triassic and were already clearly advanced even at that stage. By the middle of the Triassic, they were the dominant land-based predators and were pretty much uncontested for millions of years. They were pretty much the dominant life forms until the extinction event at the end of the Triassic. Meaning, no contest, they were in charge, which is why we see so many of them diversify into all these different yet similar forms over the course of history, like the Rauisuchians. But I'm getting way off topic here, and my point is that these animals all appear in the fossil record in already well-established families that clearly have their own morphological differences. Which means that at the very least, they evolved into these different forms earlier than we can see in the fossil record. Basically, aside from a few different taxons during the early and middle Triassic, we don't have a ton in terms of the origin for these animals, which leads to my next point. Deinosaurs, a group of pseudosuchians that somewhat resemble ankylosaurs, are known exclusively from the late Triassic, which doesn't sound all that confusing since most of these animals do. But their origins are completely mysterious, like Aragorn when they first meet him at the Prancing Pony. We have, like, an idea that they evolved from other more basal pseudosuchians at least during the Middle Triassic, but there are ideas that they may have evolved even earlier than that because they were incredibly advanced with a multitude of traits that the other pseudosuchians didn't have, and it was expected that they split off much earlier to evolve said traits. And like, I get it, there are a lot of things that we don't know, but the fact that not only do we not know, but there are literally millions of years when they could have evolved is absolutely mind-blowing to me. The fact is that we don't know how long it took them to achieve this ankylosaur-like armor, and they could have evolved way sooner than we thought, but probably not that much sooner. With so much blank space and other advanced pseudosuchians like Deinosuchus appearing in the early Triassic, I wouldn't be surprised if these animals even have an origin back then. And you know what? Let's talk about that real quick. Nearly all of the advanced pseudosuchians first appear in the late Triassic, from around 237 million years ago onwards. Now, if this was a normal situation, we might find fossils of primitive forms of these creatures that are older than that in their late Triassic relatives and show us a solid evolutionary line. But that isn't what we see, except with the phytosaurs, as we see a basal form called Deinosuchus in the early Triassic around 242 million years ago. Way to be normal, phytosaurs. But in most cases, that's not true, and part of that starts with this guy. This is Deinosuchus. Deinosuchus is an advanced Deinosuchus, which is part of the group known as Poposaurids. The Poposaurids are a fairly advanced group of pseudosuchians, and one of the more successful during the late Triassic. But that's the thing, Deinosuchus isn't from the late Triassic, rather it's even older than that old phytosaur, at around 247 million years old, but it's far more advanced than that phytosaur. Deinosuchus has advanced features of other poposauroids, like a sail and a large, bulky, four-legged body. The fact that it's not a basal or primitive member of this group is honestly kind of a big deal. Appearing so early in the Triassic meant that poposauroids had already split off from the rest of the Crocs by the early Triassic at the latest, and maybe even earlier, perhaps during the Permian. I don't know about y'all, but to me, that is absolutely crazy. These guys are already incredibly old, but they may be so old that we still haven't even found their oldest forms. And the funny thing is, we only really have confirmation of this for the poposauroids. Every other group of pseudosuchians from the Triassic has almost no fossil material before we hit the later stages of the Triassic. Many of these new families of animals began to appear as already advanced forms, with no clear indication of where they came from or how long they've been around except for how advanced they were. If we're being honest, they probably evolved in the Triassic, but wouldn't it be insane if we found out that a bunch of them evolved in the Permian? Like, imagine crocodilians in the Permian. They'd probably be small and fast-moving to avoid the large synapsid predators. Also, if they did originate in the Permian, it's always been a funny concept to me ever since I found out about Deinosuchus that Deinosuchus' ancestors saw Dimetrodon and a Dilophosaurus and said, yeah, that's pretty cool, and then just copied their sails. Okay, but aside from their origin, there's still a couple crazy things about crocodiles. At this point, we should all be well aware that crocs use an ambush method to hunt their prey, and if you're not well aware, what are you doing, living under a rock? They lay in wait under the water's edge and strike when their prey leans down to drink or is just not paying attention. This is an incredibly ancient technique, which already kind of blows my mind. These animals have been ambushing prey at the water's edge at least since the Triassic. Remember the phytosaurs I was talking about? Well, they were likely ambush hunters themselves. They wouldn't have been as adept at living on land as modern crocs because they had a more primitive stance and kind of weird ankles and wrists. Many of these aquatic predators like Deinosuchus would have waited in ambush at the water's edge, showing that this tried and true method is as old as the dinosaurs, which is kind of insane. Imagine how much patience you need to just be sitting there at the water's edge waiting for food to come to you, and how successful that has to be for it to still be used in modern crocs to this day, millions of years later. There's a lesson in there somewhere, but whatever it is, I'm too tired to figure it out. Instead of any fancy schmancy way of taking down prey, just like modern crocs, they like to bite it with one of the most devastating forces in the animal kingdom and then drown it or shake it so hard that it dies from the force itself. It's also really interesting to me that despite all the other methods of hunting that they adopted over the millennia, including terrestrial predation or hunting in marine environments, the method that worked the most and stuck around was shake them so hard they die. But it is an effective strategy, you gotta admit. And you know, modern crocs also do the death roll on top of all that, but most of these older crocs couldn't do that. They didn't have the right muscles for it, meaning for hundreds of millions of years they couldn't do one of their most famous moves and would likely have to rely on either drowning them or shaking them so hard that their brain just vibrates. Oh yeah, that's another thing too. A lot of prehistoric crocodile relatives couldn't, in fact, do the death roll. We don't know exactly where the roll evolved, but we know that some could and some couldn't, which is also mind-blowing. Like, I understand that they evolved separately and it took a very specific set of lines to get to the death roll in the first place, but you'd think that they'd convergently evolve something like that when it's so incredibly useful to their hunting method, you know? But then again, maybe it wasn't so useful for their hunting method back then, which is why more of them didn't evolve it until later. And don't worry, most of the famous giant crocodiles like Deinosuchus and Purussaurus could still in fact do the death roll, but others like Sarcosuchus most likely couldn't. You know what? While we're on the topic of Deinosuchus and Purussaurus, we literally don't know which one is bigger. That's the bottom line, mates. Sorry. There is a lot of debate around the size of these two giants, and unfortunately it looks like as of right now there isn't and won't be a definitive answer for some time unless we find new fossil material. If you want my opinion, if an official publication comes out that describes this supposed new evidence that Deinosuchus is larger that I've heard a bunch about online, then I'd probably say Deinosuchus has the stronger claim. Otherwise, based on the rest of the evidence, it's about a tie. For some reason, a lot of you guys like fight content, and a lot of you want to know who'd win in a fight, and if you really want to know, go ask Goji Center. Personally, I love their videos, and if you like dinosaur or kaiju fight content, I definitely recommend giving them a watch. And when it comes to this kind of stuff, they do scientific stuff as well, including like a T-Rex versus Spinosaurus one that they did a while back. You know what? Screw it. Goji Center, this is me actually asking you to make a Deinosuchus versus Purussaurus video. Who do you guys think would win, and why? And remember, I'm also on standby to answer any more scientific questions if you have them. Oh, that's not how I should have asked? My bad. Let me try again. Goji Center, make a Deinosuchus versus Purussaurus video and my friendship is yours. I don't really make fight content because in reality most of these animals wouldn't fight even if they were given the opportunity, but if they were going to fight anywhere it'd be those testing centers that Goji Center has. Anyways, you know what else is crazy? How many separate times they evolved adaptations to live on the land and it never stuck. You'd think that after a few attempts they'd give up, but no, every time the opportunity came around they immediately tried to fill the open niche by making a land version that could often run and chase down prey. Of course, you have animals like Purussaurus, who may or may not be terrestrial because of that new research, but then you have animals like the Sebasid crocodilians, who are definitely terrestrial. In the Triassic, where they filled basically every niche imaginable, who could really blame them? The Permian extinction wiped out most all life, and you gotta fill in the gaps somehow. I'll give them a pass there. But those Triassic guys were way too specialized, and as the Triassic passed, most of those land dwellers faded away. They try again with animals like Purussaurus during the time of the dinosaurs, and they have some minor success, but ultimately their aquatic lifestyle just proved superior, and most of the time they got outcompeted on the land. Even today, some crocodiles like the Cuban croc exhibit behavior where they can go on land, but even then, they still prefer the water overall. Don't get me wrong, land-based crocs are terrifying and awesome predators, but they just never managed to stick. In contrast, the aquatic lifestyle has allowed them to persist through nearly every major extinction for 200 million years. That is nothing short of ridiculously cool. The fact that they diversified so much that there were multiple land-based crocodiles from different groups that were herbivores is also absolutely insane. Like, hey, let's just ditch this million-year-old diet we've been doing and have a salad. It sounds just like the panda and what they're doing. These animals like Deinosuchus really just show us how hilarious and brilliant crocodiles are and how much they really diversified, and it's really just wonderful. But it's also freaking annoying if you're trying to study them. Oh yeah, you guys remember that time where Crocs turned into mosasaurs for a bit? Good times. Oh, you don't remember? Yeah, in case you forgot, the geosaurines are a thing. One group of ancient crocodile relatives called the Deinosuchians took on a marine lifestyle, and they got so far into it that some of them began to resemble mosasaurs. They lost their armor and converted their feet into flippers, and these were the geosaurs. You remember that time they tried the pelican thing? Yeah, that also happened. Twice, actually.
I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
The first was in the Cretaceous with an animal called Deinosuchus, and then again in the Miocene with something called Purussaurus, respectively. They had so much time on their hands and they elected to try as much as they could, though some things they did more than others. I'm looking at you, land crocs. And the craziest part to me is that despite all this stuff, everything they've done, how long they've lived, they're in danger all over the world because of us. It's honestly incredibly sad to me that so many of these animals are under threat all over the world. Don't get me wrong, it warms my heart that so many people are doing what they can to try and save these animals, but heartbreaking changes and decisions that harms these creatures happen consistently, especially within governments around the world, especially in the US government. These guys have been here since all the way back before the dinosaurs. They've seen countless eons come and go, millennia that we could never understand or even begin to understand, and we are the biggest threat they've ever faced. It sucks, honestly, and I feel for them, and hopefully humanity can come together to help preserve these amazing beasts. Hopefully this video gives you an idea of how absolutely crazy these guys really are and how much interesting stuff there is about them out there. I hope you all enjoyed, folks. I'm gonna go watch some YouTube and pass out for like an entire month. Remember to be good people, drink plenty of water, and have a fantastic day.